I'm your host, John Myers, live from Stillwater, Oklahoma. We have got a great show tonight. It's John Myers. Hey, everybody. Gotta have my notes. It's John Myers from the KICKER UnMasked studios. Gotta have my notes. Alternator. Hey, everybody. We have fun. Hey, everybody. Hit like and subscribe. Right here, right now. It's John Myers. We like to give stuff away. Alternator. Post some more pictures. We got to thank Steve and Becky live from Stillwater, Oklahoma. Don't forget Texas Roadhouse right here, right now. Hey, everybody. Don't forget right here, right now. We have got a great show tonight. Hey, everybody. Had a great dinner tonight. It's John Myers. Right here, right now. Had a great dinner tonight. So, hey, everybody. So, housekeeping. Had a great dinner tonight. So, alternator. Housekeeping. Housekeeping. So, Tuesday night. Housekeeping. From the KICKER UnMasked studios. Housekeeping. Right here, right now. Hey, everybody. So, it's John Myers. Hey, everybody. It's John Myers from the KICKER UnMasked studios. Hey, everybody. From the KICKER UnMasked studios. It's John Myers. Right here, right now. We have got a great show tonight. Hey, everybody. We have got a great show tonight. It's John Myers. Hey, everybody. Right here. Hey guys, do not adjust your set. It is John Myers coming to you live from the Stillwater UnMasked KICKER studios. Hey, it's been a great couple weeks. I've been gone, but I've been having a great time. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit. I got a bunch of the good crew back with me tonight. We've got Ernie back there, JW, Colin's filling in, and of course, we've got Steven behind the camera. But Steven's back. He's been gone for quite a while. You guys need to congratulate him. He just got his CDL. So he's going to be able to help out JW on those long trips in the XRV when they come out to see you guys and have some fun. So it's been a kind of a crazy couple weeks. Jacob's been in Chicago. He was doing a Best Buy training event. JW at Surf City. See some pictures of that. I was at Surf City. I can't even remember where I'm going anymore. And he was at Jeep Week, and that was in Ocean City. So yeah, we had a lot of cool things going on. So I've been kind of watching the chats up here. Bobby, you did it again. You made it first on the chat. Want to thank everybody for showing up. Thanks, Cornut. Living Loud with Andy. Don't forget about the after show right after this event. Be a little bit of break in between, but make sure you tune in for that. And as always, make sure you sign up for the KICKER Club. If you haven't done it already, over 60,000 members. That is awesome. So guys, don't forget the contest going tonight. We're going to give away prizes as we everyone's going to get an Unmasked t-shirt, everyone's going to get a koozie, and we're also going to give away a set of EB400s, TWS2s, and of course we're going to give away the Bullfrog 100. So we're going to take a quick break, come back with us, and we're going to have some fun with some troubleshooting. So thanks for tuning in.
Speaking of troubleshooting, let's switch you.
KICKER Performance Audio. For almost 50 years, we've been rocking the planet with our world-class product covering everything that drives you, whether in your car, truck, boat, motorcycle, side-by-side, or even on your head. KICKER Performance Audio's passion for bringing you your favorite music like you've never heard it before is what drives us. So wherever you need us, KICKER Performance Audio will be there for you.
Hey guys, we are back. I know some of you were probably checking your speakers to make sure they were working okay. Well, it was in fact my microphone, so Stephen took care of that. So hopefully we got a little bit better audio. And I did forget to mention, if you're going to register tonight, it's kicker.com/umweekly. That's where you register, and we're going to take those reservations. We're going to take the entrance clear up to 8:30. You can tell it's been a long time since I've done this, but it's good to be back with you guys. I've got Jacob Luckey, one of our awesome trainers up here. We're going to be going over some troubleshooting tips and basically some processes. If you guys have any questions, JW is really good about putting those up on the screen, so make sure you type those. And always, if you don't get them on the show, support@kicker.com. I mean, it's pretty easy. But the main thing, if you're going to do troubleshooting or any installations, I mean, you've got to have some good tools, don't you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of basic tools that you pretty much always need when you're doing electronic troubleshooting in your car. First one I always suggest is
a brain.
A brain,
yeah,
right.
You got to have that.
You got to have a multimeter as well. Now, that's pretty much going to be your workhorse of troubleshooting. And if you call in any tech support line, whether it's KICKER, Rockford Fosgate, a lot of times the first question they're going to ask you is, do you have a multimeter? What are some other tools you might use, John?
Well, you've got the distortion meter, the SMD1, that's going to detect distortion, but something else that's really important, especially if you're looking for good sound, and very few people actually use these, and that's the polarity checker. Tell them how that works.
Yeah, so this is an interesting little tool, and basically you get like a CD, or you can download a track to a USB, and it plays these little pop tracks through your speakers, and you can test each one of your speakers individually. If you start recording, press the test button and hold it up to your speaker, you'll get a red light if your speaker's out of phase, and you'll get a green light if your speaker's in phase. It's a pretty cool tool. Number one problem, or one of the biggest problems that I used to get when I worked in tech support is, hey, I just installed some new speakers in my car, and I don't have any bass response. What gives? And first thing I would ask them is, are you certain that everything is in phase? And oftentimes they weren't sure, so what we'd have to go do is run through and check the wires going to the speaker and make sure they didn't reverse it from the factory, or they didn't reverse their wires at the amplifier. What else, John? What else can you think of that we don't have up here?
Well, I mean, there's some other things that you might want to use if you're really digging in deep, like an oscilloscope, but we're going to save that for another show. We're going to go over some basic troubleshooting tonight, just some simple things you can do. And, it may be from the point that you have no sound, or something just doesn't sound right, or it isn't working exactly the way you want. And with always, anytime you do anything like this, a little bit of common sense goes a long way. I mean, if you got no sound and you look and you see your radio doesn't have a display, you probably don't have any power to it. But simple things like that. But what kind of questions you got? I know, Jacob, you got a lot of them over here.
Oh, yeah, I got a whole list. We're going to go through a whole ton of stuff tonight. So.
I made a bunch of notes, and I gave him my notes, so I don't remember what I wrote, so he's probably going to prompt me in a lot of the notes. But
So the first one, so let's say we've got like a fresh installed, brand new audio system. You just put all the equipment in the car, and you go to test it, and now you have no sound whatsoever coming from the system. Well, what are some things we can start checking?
Well, like I said, first thing you want to check is, do you have power? And that's going to be the main thing. Now, not only power to the head unit, power to any electronic equipment in the car. If you have processors, amplifiers, obviously, equalizers, whatever you have, make sure everything has got power. The next thing you're going to want to check and make sure is your source is working. Are you using Bluetooth? Are you using USB? Make sure the source is playing and working, and if it's Bluetooth, obviously connected to your head unit. Mm-hmm. And then other little things like, is the muting on? Is the volume up on your phone? Some of the phones, with Bluetooth, you have to turn the volume up, on the phone rather than the unit. So that's one of the big things to check right away. And other bizarre things that can happen is, are your RCAs plugged in? You know, I've seen instances where, you know, did a whole install and you go to listen to it, nothing works, and found out that, you know, hey, when I was, you know, wire tying those RCAs under the dash, I unplugged them from the head unit. And,
Yeah.
you know, just goofy things like that. So little common sense goes a long way. And then obviously check to make sure your speakers are connected, because it happens. Sometimes you get everything put in and it's like you set your sub box down and you rip one of the wires out of the terminal cup because the wire's too short. There's just, like I say, common sense will go a long way in determining what's wrong. And it's a process of elimination.
Yeah.
So what else do I got? If we don't, you know, have any sound when we first put that head unit in?
Well, if you don't have any sound, I mean, like you said, the first thing you want to check is make sure your head unit's powered on and working. But you know, the kind of a flow that we always recommended in tech support was to kind of start at the front of your system and work your way back from there. So if your head unit's working, it's displaying all the proper information on the screen, like the right track and that your CD's playing or whatever you're using, phone, USB, then the first thing to check would be your RCAs. So you're going to get your meter, set it to measure AC voltage, and make sure your RCAs are plugged in first thing. Because sometimes, you know, I've had situations personally where I've sworn I've plugged them in, and turns out like my left RCA is unplugged behind the radio for whatever reason. So make sure they're plugged in, then find the other end of your RCAs, and you're going to want to set it to measure AC voltage. You're going to put the negative probe on your shield, positive probe on the pin in the middle. Honestly, you could flip them if you wanted to, since we're measuring AC voltage. And you're going to play a test tone and turn the volume of your radio up and down. And you should see that voltage fluctuate on your multimeter on both of your RCAs. And that's going to tell you that the signal is getting through your RCAs properly. So let's say you've got a signal from your radio.
What voltage do you think you should see measuring the signal out of the RCA?
Yeah, so that's going to depend on your head unit. So probably like maximum 4 volts or 5 volts, depending on the head unit. I would say most of them are like 2.5 volts. But so we've got a signal. We know our radio's working. We've got a signal from our RCAs, but we still don't have any sound. So, John, what's something else we need to check after that?
Well, if you're checking, if you've got speaker level input to your amplifier, obviously you're going to need to measure that too, and then you should get much more voltage. You know, if you got a 15, volt signal, you're probably looking at like 50 watts or so. Remember, 25 watts is equivalent to a 10 volt signal. 400 watts is equivalent to a 40 volt signal. So if you're testing your speaker outputs, if you're using those for signal, it's going to be a much higher voltage. So you need to make sure that it's all dialed in and proper.
So let's say, we've got our RCAs going to our amplifier. Everything looks good on the front end, and now we need to start checking things on our amplifier. So first thing I would look at is make sure the amplifier is turning on. Make sure that you've got power to your amplifier. And there's actually quite a few things that could go wrong in the power delivery to your amplifier. First thing you can always check for is a bad connection at the battery, maybe a bad ground or some kind of corrosion or something. But then the next thing you want to look for is to check your fuse. Make sure your fuse isn't blown. Make sure it's actually hooked up and connected. And then last thing, once all that looks okay, I'd get a meter and measure for voltage at your amplifier.
Yep. Something else you can do, if you don't have a meter and you want to check the output of the amplifier, just grab any speaker. It doesn't have to be a huge, powerful speaker, but just take any speaker and you can literally go up to the output of the amplifier and just touch it to the speaker outputs, just even set the speaker right on the amp. That at least tells you that, hey, the amplifier is working and we definitely have signal. And, it's just a process of elimination.
Yep, exactly. And all you're trying to do is eliminate all of your pieces of equipment from the equation. So let's say we've got an audio system and everything was working great. Now this is where it can get a little bit more complicated than a fresh install.
Now we're going to have some fun.
Yeah.
Real quick, I think, who was it that asked a question I just saw up here just a second ago, and thank you guys for tuning in. Randy G, I'm getting a scratchy sound from my remote knob. That could be dirty pot. Now, it's not what you're thinking, not, they dropped it on the ground. No, it's totally different than that, but you've got a rheostat in there, which is a coil of wires and a little wiper that goes across, and sometimes that coil of wire can get oxidated, so what you want to do is get some electronic tuner cleaner. So they make a spray that you spray on that won't hurt the electronics. You can do it while it's on. It evaporates really quick, but that really does a good job at any controls that are scratchy or as you turn them. So that's a great way to test that. So good question. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, you know what? Let's go ahead and answer some questions as we roll through this. So what's the next one we got? Marcus Nance, how would you check to see if your amps are connected correctly to your subs or highs and mids?
So when you say connected correctly, there could be a couple things with that. Some head units will have a front, rear, and a subwoofer output, and some head units literally have the ability to do a three-way crossovers. So always label your RCA connections at both ends before you put them in the car.
Yeah.
Same thing with your speaker wires, because if you run a subwoofer input into, say, a front stage input on an amplifier, you're not going to get any mids and highs. So that's a great thing to check. And then, as always, make sure that the amplifier is designed to accept the type of signal you're running into it. So, good question.
So let's say that you've already got everything hooked up and you completely neglected to label your RCAs when you installed that audio system. One way you could check to make sure that everything is connected properly is to take and go into your head unit. Assuming you have front and rear channels all hooked up, you can roll your fader to the front left speaker, and music should only be coming from the front left speaker. If it's coming from the rear right speaker instead of the front left, then you've either got your speaker wired incorrectly or your RCA is in the wrong spot. And that's just going to require a little bit of fixing stuff at your amplifier and redoing some connections. But repeat that process for your front right, rear left, and rear right speakers until they're all sounding correct. And then the last thing you could do is use your polarity checker to make sure that they're all in phase with one another.
Yep.
And that would be how I would verify that your speakers are hooked up properly.
Now, if your RCA cables, if you're not sure which one is running to what, you don't want to power your system up, you can just take the center tip and the shield, put a wire across that, short it, and go back with the test meter, like your own meter, and see which one's shorted at the back. That's another way to determine which wire does what. So there's a lot of little tricks with that you can do. So, another question we get asked, and this is something that is not as popular right now, or not popular, it's not as prevalent, I should say. The people that say, hey, my system's been working great, everything's wonderful, but I pull up to a stoplight and the vehicle shuts off and it's still doing really good, but the vehicle starts, my system shuts off for, 2 or 3 seconds. So, but hey, everything was great. Is there a problem with my audio system? Probably not. What's going to be the problem there is when the vehicle goes into start-stop mode, it's going to start up the vehicle while all the electronics are running. Well, that voltage is going to drop. The older the battery gets, the less reserve it has left, and once again, the voltage is going to drop farther. So you might come to a point where eventually it's going to start shutting off the audio system. That's not a problem with the audio system. That means your battery's probably not up to par, doing everything it needs to do. And the best thing to do is take it to one of the parts stores or your local mechanic friend and have them put a good battery load tester on it, and that will tell you if it's good or not. And there's some pretty cool ones out there. I mean, I just actually had to replace a battery about a week and a half ago, and we're going to talk about that scenario here in just a couple minutes. But yeah, it was kind of interesting to see what they were using for that type of a tester. You had to put in all the information on the battery, what type of battery it was, what class of battery it was, what the cold cranking amps were. So, like I say, not just like the old days when we had just like a little resistive thing in a meter, that not quite as sophisticated as what you need with today's batteries.
And you bring up a good point, John, because a lot of times when people get an audio system installed or they're working on an audio system, a lot of people tend to assume that the equipment they install is defective. Oftentimes that's not the case. It can be something with your vehicle that's maybe like maintenance has been neglected or there's a failing part elsewhere in the system. So it's 100% possible to be something that's totally unrelated to what you just installed in the car.
And of course, I see Kicker Truck Travis out here. So, hey, thanks for tuning in tonight. And we actually featured his vehicle on one of the shows not too long ago.
That's
the
cool.
one we haven't back. But engine noise. He's asking, how do you get rid of engine noise? Well, we could do an entire show on engine noise. We could probably do 2 episodes. I mean, that's one of those areas that is really not a lot of fun to get into, but that's one of the cool things about the Kicker products with the fit inputs. We allow you to run speaker level right into the amplifier, so it's a higher voltage, and then it's not tied to chassis ground. Typically, an amplifier on your RCA shields, the RCA shields are all tied together, and then they're tied to the power supply ground on the amplifier, which is grounded to the body. So now you've grounded all your signal to the chassis of the vehicle, so yeah, you get a chance for engine noise. If you're running speaker level into our amplifier, since the RCAs are not tied directly to the chassis ground, which is why you can do that, there should be almost zero chance to get engine noise, because you won't have to worry about it being picked up by the RCAs to the vehicle and being such a low volume level. So yeah, that's just one of the places that engine noise can come from. But it can come from the type of RCAs, the placement where you run them. It can come from, ground loops. I mean, that can actually be present in the factory equipment or the factory head unit, which is pretty much impossible to fix without replacing the head unit with something else. But I've run into cases where the factory radio in the dash has engine noise in it, but one of the reasons why that gets out, it's usually at such a low volume level, most people don't notice it. Sometimes the factory speaker's so crappy you can't hear it anyway, but you don't really notice it until you amplify that signal, and you're going to amplify the noise along with it. So yeah, engine noise is it's a fun thing to try to diagnose, but not if you're doing an install and you're trying to get it out the door.
So tack on to what you were saying, I noticed that I had engine noise in a factory system that I was doing not too long ago. So Tom, one of our VPs, I was doing an install in, I think it was his nephew or something along that line. But
I can remember this vehicle.
He had a Mitsubishi 3000 GT, and I was installing, it was a sweet car, and I was installing a Key 200.4 amplifier in it and trying to run the auto setup and everything. And everything worked great up until I started the engine. So, I turned the key on, I ran the auto setup, everything sounded great, start the engine, and I have this awful engine noise from all the speakers, and I can't get it to go away. So I tried to pull the factory radio out and see where it was grounded, and the radio was grounded to the bracket that held it in place.
Oh, that's a good ground.
Yeah. So I took and I screwed a wire directly into the chassis and ran it directly to the ground on the battery, and the engine noise still didn't go away. Isolated the amplifier and everything directly to the battery, radio directly to the battery, bypassed everything I could think of, and there was still this awful, awful engine noise coming from the factory radio. So what we ended up doing was replacing the radio with a newer unit, and that solved our problem.
Yep.
No more engine noise.
Sometimes it's just defective equipment. Talking about engine noise, one of the cases that I had was actually one of my own cars. I had a system, and always had a little bit of engine noise after we did that. So it was really bizarre. It was never really bad, but you start testing by adjusting the gain. Does it change with the gain? If it does, it's signal coming in the amplifier. But this didn't change with the gain on the amplifier, and it was always there. So I just kind of lived with it, and it didn't matter what I said. So I just rolled the windows down so you couldn't hear the noise. But I drove this car around for about 2 years and had a really nice system. And I mean, it was really good quality equipment. And this equipment, when I put it in when I owned my store, I always prayed to the engine noise gods. Out back we're sacrificing goats in the back to the engine noise gods, because that equipment was really susceptible to engine noise, and that's what I was using. So I figured I'm just going to have to live with it. Well, I ended up selling the vehicle, and I started pulling everything out, and I ran into a time crunch, and I had the amplifier pulled out, and the crossovers pulled out, and I just still had engine noise. The amplifiers were out of the vehicle, and I had engine noise in the right front dash speaker.
That's crazy.
So where's that coming from? I mean, obviously it's not coming from the amplifier. What happened was passive crossovers have a coil of wire. Well, what happens when you put a magnetic field through a crossover? You induct voltage into it. So yes, I had the passive crossovers mounted right on top of the factory computer, and it was picking up the noise through the passive crossover.
That is crazy.
So there really are a lot of things. But just remember, when you're putting in a system, very good grounds, high a voltage as you can get. Just do things the right way. Use good cables. I mean, twisted pair, good shielded twisted pair RCA cables. And where you run your RCA cables is very important too. You don't want to run your RCA next to your power and ground wires.
Yeah, not next to anything that can pick up interference. I know one real surefire way to eliminate engine noise or prevent it from ever happening.
Don't start the engine?
Drive an EV.
Yeah, that's one way. So, Jacob, the smartass over here.
Yeah.
But he's right. He is absolutely right.
Well, if there's no engine, there's no chance for engine noise.
Nope. All right, so let's not worry about the engine noise. And like I say, we got the whole system, dialed in. It's been working great, or maybe it it wasn't working great. You know, we don't know, but we're going to go back in and figure this out. So the next thing we got on the list is, what if it blows fuses? I mean, it's going to make a difference, you know, if you're blowing fuses. Does it blow it instantly? Or does it only blow it when you turn up the system to a certain point? So there's several things you can check to that. Obviously, if your fuse blows instantly, I mean, you go to test those, the amplifier's not on. You know, you turn the car on, you turn the system on, no sound, and you realize the radio's on, but your amplifier's not on. First thing to check is, did you put the fuse in it?
Yeah.
That happens. You do the install and forget to put the main fuse in the front. So you put that in, and the minute you put that fuse in, that fuse blows. Well, when a fuse blows, that usually means you have a direct short to ground somewhere. So the big key is figuring out where that fuse is blowing and why. Because if it's blowing in the front of the vehicle, you should have a very short wire going to the battery. So make sure that your wire's not shorted there. And if your wire is shorted anywhere else between the amplifier and that fuse, it is going to blow the fuse. We're drawing pictures up here again. Welcome back, Stephen. So, troubleshooting. So he's shooting a guy in jail.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you get problems with fuses blowing, it's once again just a matter of breaking everything down. So the main fuse is blown up front. So check to make sure the wire isn't shorted between the battery and the fuse, and then check your power wire. And one good, easy way to check the power wires, once you disconnect it from the amplifier, and take an ohm meter and measure from that power wire to chassis ground. It should be an open circuit. I mean, you know, millions of ohms, mega ohms. And if you have, you know, a couple ohms or, you know, less than an ohm, obviously the power wire is shorted ground, so you want to go back and figure out where that is. Same thing if you've got a multi-amp system and you're not blowing the fuse in the back, but you're blowing the fuse in the front, you know, or you're blowing the fuse in the back and not the front where your distribution block is, you may have a short between the distribution block and the amplifier. So it's enough that it's going to blow the fuse at the distribution block, but it's not going to pull enough current because you should have a much bigger fuse up front.
So what happens if your fuse doesn't actually blow, but then your fuse holder is completely melted and scorched?
Yep, that usually means a very bad connection, and we got a picture of that coming up a little bit later for the failed pics. So we always talk about if you got a poor connection, you're going to have a voltage drop, and you're going to have heat buildup, and you're going to have some melted plastic. But there is another scenario that I've run into, and it's not as, you know, as easy to come by today because you don't see a lot of these fuses, but I've actually had cars before where the system would turn on, play a little bit, but the minute you really start to get on, it would shut off. And, you know, of course, you do the troubleshooting. It's like, check everything. You know, hey, I got 12 volts, you know, at the fuse. I got 12 volts at the amplifier. Turn it on, and I don't have 12 volts anymore.
Yeah, it drops to like 11 or 10 volts.
Or even lower than that. Those glass fuses, those AGU fuses, which are about that long, they're about 3/8 of an inch in diameter. I've seen those fuses, sometimes they'll use like a little snap-in, where they snap into a terminal or a fuse block, and that's not a very strong connection. So if you got a lot of current going through that, and it's not a really good tight connection, there's going to be a voltage drop there. What I've seen happen, it sounds bizarre, but they've gotten hot enough to melt the solder inside the fuse, at the cap of the fuse, but you couldn't see it because it's under that silver cap.
Wow.
So it would measure 12 volts, but the minute you tried to put any current to it, it would not pass the current. So something else you got to watch out for is, you know, the fuses might look good, but check them very carefully. And the biggest problem were those AGU fuses.
Yeah, and again, guys, likely the only way you're going to figure that out is if you have a meter and you're able to measure for that kind of thing.
And those meters are really expensive, right?
Oh, yeah. No.
Thousands of dollars.
You can get, I mean, honestly, the cheapos at the parts store work good enough. You know, if you're just trying to measure voltage and figure out kind of what's going on, the cheapos for like 15, 20 bucks at the parts store, those little really lightweight plastic ones that look like an old freaking Game Boy or something, those work awesome for just basic troubleshooting. But if you want to go, I mean, you can even get something like this with tons of different functions on Amazon for what?
Multimeter.
80 bucks? Yeah, multimeter,
really,
exactly.
You know, pretty good one. And we always want you make sure you use really good tools, but I'd rather you have a cheap voltmeter or multimeter that worked rather than none.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, because those things come in handy for everything. I mean, you have to check your wall outlet, you know, my toaster doesn't turn on. So you can say, hey, does the outlet work? So it's really, and they don't normally suggest you jam metal things into the outlet, but if you're using a meter, yeah, I found that out when I was little. I cut an extension cord with a pair of scissors when I was like 5 or 6. I don't remember the rest of the day. And
I've heard this story before.
it was kind of a mess, but
I've also heard the story where you got struck by lightning and you can't remember the rest of the day either.
yeah, you know, that's why they call me Sparky. If it's going to happen, it's probably going to happen to me. But we had a little occurrence that happened a couple weeks ago, and it really is what inspired this entire show.
Oh, this is with Sandy's car, right?
Yep, I came back from doing the event. I just came back from doing the Surf City event, and I was at lunch, and I was sitting there with my wife, and I looked over and I saw Sandy and Ernie sitting there, and they were talking, and I kind of overheard what they were saying. They were talking about troubles with their car, and I went over and asked them, so what's going on? And Sandy said, well, her battery was dying in her car. So, you know, Ernie was going to be nice enough to help her out that afternoon, and Ernie said, you know, I think it's just, you know, a short somewhere, or, you know, she's got a bad battery. I don't exactly know. So he was going to go back and test it. And I didn't hear a whole bunch till later on that day or actually it was the next day, because I think I was back in the office. I think it was on a Wednesday.
Yeah, and I think that was when I caught you outside when you were trying to get to the fuse box and you had to take like the headlight housing out to access the fuse because you couldn't pull the fuses out or something like that.
This was a 19 Jeep Compass. And one of our engineers actually got into the vehicle before, and there's 2 fuse blocks in that vehicle, and always know where your fuse block is if you have problems, and we'll tell you some other ways you can test things at the fuse block. But one of the fuse blocks was under the dash, and you had to dismantle the dash to get to it. It wasn't under a simple plastic cover. And I don't think you're really supposed to access that fuse block because it had a whole row of 20 amp fuses and a whole row of 7.5 amp fuses. So it wasn't your typical fuse block, but the actual fuse block was under the hood, and they can be in the vehicle or they can be under the hood, or like a Cadillac I had, we're in the trunk.
Oh, wow.
So that's not uncommon either. So know where your fuse box is.
You know, kind of a niche case, but the old 86 Porsche that I had, the fuse box was underneath a wooden slat in the passenger side floorboard. So kind of a weird spot.
And those
for
were
it.
weird looking fuses too.
Yeah, they were.
They looked kind of like a 2-ended bullet and it wasn't even sealed. I mean, the wires exposed to the elements. So yeah, those were always interesting. But this one on this Jeep, literally, it was behind the washer bottle.
Oh, that's right. And you couldn't get the washer bottle out.
Until you pulled the front of the car off. So I don't know who designed that, but I think engineers should have to work on what they design.
Yeah, I agree. Just stick them in a garage with some tools and start taking stuff apart. See what you can find that doesn't work.
You know, Ernie and Joe were working on this, and you know, we thought that hey, there's something wrong. You know, we put an aftermarket radio in it a couple months ago, and it's like maybe there's something wrong with the aftermarket radio. It had about a 1.5 amp draw.
That's quite a bit.
And that is quite a bit. That's enough to kill it overnight.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely didn't want to leave it that way. So, like, you know, what are we going to do? So the first thing I did was I knew that, you know, we put an aftermarket radio in it a few months before, so maybe that's the problem. You know, maybe some aftermarket equipment, and there was a question to whether the interface was causing the computer to stay on. So there was really no way to test that because you pull the fuses out and everything shuts off.
Yeah.
So I pulled the entire radio out and the interface and unplugged everything. And, you know, actually, we should tell you how to check current draw. Tell them with the meter what they do to check current draw.
I'll let you do it since you just did it the other day.
All right. So we got this great little meter here. And I'm going to pull the leads off. And you got a positive and negative lead. And it's not absolutely crucial to have the positive and negative in the right. I mean, you're going to get a positive or negative reading. It doesn't matter. You're just looking for a reading. But if we take the meter, normally, on most meters, you've got the common, and then you get the positive lead, which are plugged in on the right, or usually in the bottom if they're all horizontal. And it may depend on the meter you're using. But on this particular meter, this will measure up to 10 amps. The cheaper ones generally only measure up to 5.
Hopefully you don't have a draw that high in the first place.
Well, if you're measuring draw on an amplifier, you know, you probably need more than that. So what you're going to do is you're going to unplug the lead. And like I say, always follow the diagram on the bottom. And this one for the 10 amp, we've got a plug on the top. So that's going to give me a 10 amp reading. The one on the bottom does milliamps. So you always have to move the leads between voltage and current, because current does something completely different in the meter. It's going to pass the voltage and the current through the meter directly rather than just reading it statically. So once you get that set to the proper plugs and you dial this in, and I'm just going to go over here. I know you guys can't see it, but we go over here to amp draw. We're going to take this meter, go to the amplifier or whatever we think, and I usually start at the front, start at the battery.
Hang on, that's cool. So they light up to tell you which probe slots you have to have it plugged into. So, yeah, so it's this one particularly is Jacob proof.
Yeah, so. And me too, it's smarter than I am. So it's really simple. So all you're going to do is you're going to take the fuse out, from under anything, and you're going to start with the battery. The first thing that's connected to the battery, you're going to go to that connection and lift that connection, and you're going to insert these leads in between it. So one lead's going to connect to the wire that goes to the battery. The other one's going to connect to the fuse block, distribution block, or whatever it is. And you're going to watch to see if you have any current draw. And what should they see, in an average vehicle?
Well, I guess it depends on what all is on and what you're measuring. But, I would expect, like, if some accessories are on or if you're measuring, like, a particular circuit, it should be less than the fused value of whatever that circuit is. So
yeah, definitely.
If you're measuring like a 10 amp circuit, ideally you'd want to see less than 10 amps, or you've got a faulty fuse or something else crazy going on.
Or a motor. But, if you're just checking with everything off, there's still going to be a little bit of current draw.
Yeah, a little bit of milliamps,
yep,
I think,
which
right?
is thousandths of an amp. That's like 0.007, so 7 milliamps. And that's the power that's keeping the computer alive in the vehicle. Because the computer has to stay on. And Chevy had a problem with this, and I forgot which trucks they were, that the computer would turn on and off so often that, you leave your vehicle set for a week, it would kill the battery. But you're going to have a little bit of draw. So don't be shocked if this meter says, hey, I got 0.007 or 0.003, amp draw. That is completely normal. I mean, you're talking thousandths of an amp. But if you're pushing, 0.5, 1, 1.5, and in the case with Sandy's vehicle, you definitely have a problem. So the next thing you need to do is you need to figure out where that current draw is. You have one, but you need to figure out where it is. And one of the things I've done in the past, which is what I tried to do on this Jeep, couldn't do it, is you can pull the fuses out of the vehicle one by one. Don't pull them all out. I mean, same time. Then you don't know where the fuses go, the values. But you can literally pull the fuse out of the circuit and then insert the leads in the terminals that touch the fuse. So you got a positive and negative lead, just put those into where the fuse connects and watch the meter. If the meter has zero output or it shows zero current flow, that's not your culprit. So you basically go through every fuse in the fuse block till you find one that's reading, the draw that you have. In this case, it was like 1.24 amps. One of the things that I found, always the dealerships, they always blame the car audio guys, right?
Yeah, always.
So I did a system in a lady's Honda, and she came back about 3 weeks later and was complaining that her battery was dead. And she was really nice. She brings in all these receipts, and she said, well, you guys owe me $325. It's like, well, why? She said, well, my battery's draining. I took it to the dealership, and they said it was the stereo's problem. It's like, oh, okay. If it's stereo's problem, absolutely. We'll take care of the bill because, that shouldn't have happened. You should have brought it to us first, but she didn't. So I started doing exactly that. I took one of those little ATC fuses, that the plastic ones that plug in, and I actually soldered leads onto that. So now literally just plug the fuse in and out while it was connected to the meter, and it was very simple and very easy to check. And I got to the cigarette lighter circuit, and it was pulling 7 amps.
Whoa.
All the time.
That's probably enough to heat up that cigarette lighter.
So figured it was the element, right? Because they have elements in the inside, and they go bad. So I bought a new element for the thing, put it in, same problem. Wow. So I started taking the vehicle apart, and for some reason, where they'd run the wire, and this was done from the factory had pinched the cigarette lighter wire between one of the dash panels and the frame of the dash, and it was shorted out there.
That's scary.
So I gave her a bill for $100, and she took back to the dealership and collected for all of it.
Nice.
But it's just one of those problems you run into, and it's just a little bit of common sense, will go a long way. Now, if you're testing amplifiers current draw, same thing. If you got a big amplifier, 10 amp draw, that's going to be good for about 60 watts. So that's why you've got to have, a good current draw meter that's going to read a lot more than this will do if you're going to test the current draw on amplifiers. But it really is done the same way. And you can test the static draw on the amplifiers by just pulling the fuse out of the amp and putting this across the amplifier without any signal going to it, and that will tell you the on value. There's going to be a certain amount of current draw, or idle current, they call that the amplifier is going to pull. Generally 1, 2, or 3 amps, depending on the amplifier. Unless you got a Class A amplifier, then it's going to pull like 38. But we don't see those in car audio for that reason.
So while we're on the subject of current draw, let's talk about a little bit different type of current draw. So you're listening to music, and all of your lights in the car are dimming when your bass hits. What does that sound like to you?
It sounds like you're at a disco.
Yeah,
showing my 70s side.
Yeah, you're either at a disco or something else, but I would say...
Very common problem.
Yeah,
we get this a lot. My lights dim when I hit the music. It's like, well, don't hit the music.
Yeah. Oftentimes it's that guy that bought the biggest amplifier he could afford and installed it in his car, and
with the crappiest wire, with the worst install practices.
Exactly, and it's always like a Honda Civic with the 60 amp alternator on it too. You got 1800 watt amplifier.
And we kind of talked about it, the starter, when the starter kicks in, there's a big current drop because voltage drop because it's pulling so much current. Same thing happens with an amplifier. The more power you acquire from your amplifier, the more current it's going to pull. And if you have a weak battery, that voltage is going to drop. And that's what causes your lights to dim. You don't have a big enough battery or alternator for that circuit, or that battery has gotten weak. And once again, you can figure that. If it was great for a long time and slowly that starts, dimming more with the music, that's generally the battery going bad. But sometimes it's you don't have enough electrical system for what you're trying to do. And, the big thing is, I always ask people, what's the most important component in car audio? And it is the alternator, right? Mm-hmm.
Well, you could start your car with the battery and completely, at least on older cars, completely disconnect the battery and everything would keep going. If your alternator was charging, that was the way that I was taught to, to see if the alternator was working.
And another thing you do to test if it's the battery or the alternator, measure the voltage of the battery static. That's with nothing on, no charger on it, anything. It should measure, around 12.6 volts. That's the textbook standard. If it's, 12 volts, 11.5, or, 10.5 volts, your battery's pretty much toast. So it's time to replace it. And to check if it's the alternator, you start the vehicle and put the leads across it and put it back in the voltage mode. So we're going to put it over here and put the leads across the battery. And if it's measuring over 12.6, like 13.4 or 14.6, I've seen some vehicles as high as, we had one that was 15.3.
Yeah, 15.3.
Which is not great because even the computers don't like that in the vehicle. But that's how you know if the alternator is working, if the voltage goes up when it's running. So back to Sandy's vehicle, because this really was kind of interesting. I got online and I thought, okay, she's having this problem. We got this wonderful thing called the internet over here. You look it up on Google. So I started Googling current draw on 2019 Jeep Compass, and I found a couple possibilities. You kind of watch the chat groups, and obviously, someone was talking about, it could be the batteries getting weak. And then another post said that, hey, I saw a TSA, a service bulletin about that they had to reprogram the computer because something the computer was causing it to draw too much current. So that's a possibility too. It could be something wrong with the factory system. If you've checked everything and that there is no other explanation, that's a very good possibility. Something else I saw, which was news to me, things keep changing, get more modern all the time. One of the posts was talking about the start-stop vehicles. So start-stop vehicles, here again, we talked about the battery voltage dropping, but there was a post in there that was talking about the start-stop battery, not the main battery. So this is what was new to me. Some of the vehicles, like the Jeeps have it, and there's actually quite a few others, they've got a secondary battery that starts the vehicle and everything else runs off the main battery, the primary battery. So this post said, hey, the start-stop battery is bad and it was causing my current draw. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I had the thing on the charger because while I was trying to test it, the vehicle went dead again. And I couldn't even start it. So I put it on the charger, and that's when I went and started doing all the research on the internet. I had to do something. The battery was dead. So I said, okay, that might be what the problem is. So let's take the battery out and check it. because it was kind of buried. And it was really interesting because as you're looking at the front of the vehicle, you had the main battery, which was, basically mounted front to back. And then right on the end of it, mounted horizontally, was another little power sports style battery.
Is it like the size of a motorcycle battery?
Yeah, it literally was about twice the size of this amplifier and a little bit shorter. I mean, it was a power sports battery. And when I pulled that battery out, I actually had to grab a rag because that battery was so hot.
Oh, it was hot, and yeah, so probably had a bad cell, right?
That would be my guess. But the main battery was not hot at all. I mean, it was room temperature. And that little start-stop battery was hotter than heck. So it's like, okay, that can be a problem. So I took that battery down to the local auto center, and I had them test it. And they said, well, we can't test this battery. I said, why? You got a great test. They said, because it's too bad to test. Literally, they could not run the test on the battery. It was that bad. It was static voltage sitting there. It was like 7.9 volts.
Wow.
So it was completely shot. So I made another mistake.
What was that?
So I bought another battery while I was there. Hey, we matched it. It looked exactly the same. Took the battery, went to put it in, and I looked at it, and it's like, wait a minute. The terminals are backwards.
Oh, no.
So you've got to make sure when you replace the battery, because this battery looked exactly like the start-stop battery, but the terminals were backwards, and there was no way to move them, with the factory harnesses. They're usually wired so tight. So I had to make another trip back.
Nice.
The next day, because they were closed by that point.
Of course.
And basically returned that battery, and they didn't have a start-stop battery. I had to go to another auto parts store to get another battery, which was 70% more expensive.
Wow.
$100 versus $170.
Yep, go figure. That's like every single trip to the parts store for me. Well, we don't have it, but these guys might. And you go,
And it's going to be a whole lot of money. I could have ordered it. It would take 3 to 5 days, but poor Sandy needed her vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
So I got the right battery, and I put it in and tested everything, and everything was working pretty good. I didn't have any current draw. In fact, there was actually, I think, 0.03. So 30 amp milli draw, 30 milliamp draw.
30 amp draw.
Good grief. So 30 milliamp draw with the vehicle just shut down. But after it sat there for 10 minutes, it dropped to like 9. So what's happening is the computer will stay awake in some of these vehicles. And they call it remote accessory power, but it'll stay on for a certain period of time, and you have to wait for that to completely power down. So sometimes you might have to let it wait for 10, 15, 20 minutes, or sometimes I think I've heard some of the Hondas go as long as 30 minutes before they fully shut down and go into sleep mode.
That's right. We used to have to do some, I can't remember what exactly. We'd need to, and when we were in tech support, we'd need to do certain things where they'd have to, like people would say, that's what it was. Hey, my amplifier's not turning on when I stop the car and turn the key off and everything. They had the amplifier installed to operate off of DC offset, and they'd have to wait 20 minutes and watch the power light through the window to make sure that it shuts off when the car turns off. But that's
once
all,
you verify that, you don't have to worry about it again.
Yeah, exactly.
But that is true. Some amplifiers will stay on. In fact, ours will do exactly that on DC offset. And that's not a problem with the amplifier. It's actually really good that they are staying on because the factory system's on. A lot of vehicles use the factory audio systems for the buzzers, chimes, and alarms. So if you have the signal totally disconnected from the factory amplifier and speakers, and you wire in an aftermarket amplifier into the middle of that circuit, and you have it set to a switched 12-volt source that shuts off instantly when you shut off the key, you'll never hear the alarm that you left your lights on, you left your keys in the vehicle, or whatever it happens to be. So, which is something else I guess I forgot to mention. If you're checking that current draw, and it's fairly high, I know this is weird, or if the battery's dying overnight, I've run into this before, but sometimes when guys are working on vehicles, hey, there's a dome light, let's turn it on, let's work on the vehicle.
I've done that a million times.
And it's in the daytime, and you don't really notice it, and you give the vehicle back, or you put the vehicle back together, and you drive it home, you park it in the garage, and that light's still on, but you didn't see it in the daylight. So check that as well.
Did that to my truck with Carlos with me, actually. So we're traveling somewhere. We drove down to the OKC airport, flew out of there, and I parked my truck. It was one of those days where it was slightly overcast, but a little bit rainy, but it wasn't quite dark enough to necessitate having your headlights on, but I turned them on anyway because I wanted to be polite for other drivers, right? I get to the airport, park my truck, and I forgot my headlights were on. I've got two humongous excess power batteries in my truck, and the whole time I'm having this truck, I'm thinking these batteries are never going to die. I've left my headlights on at work and come back out, and it's still enough juice to start the battery. So I get back, land. Carlos and I end up having to drive from Houston back to the airport to pick my truck up. We get there, my truck is stone cold dead at the very top floor of the airport parking garage. And thankfully I had that little kickstart jump pack that we got,
for Christmas?
That we got for Christmas.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. It saved us. I was able to start my truck and get it going again. But yeah, I mean,
I think Tom had to use his like 7 times 2 weeks after he got it. So. Or maybe that was Roger, one of those guys. I think it was Roger. But yeah, it happens. I mean, and like I say, just check. It's common sense. Like I said, check and make sure that the big, well, sometimes I don't either. Ask anybody that knows me. So, just look for the obvious things first.
Let's take some more questions.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking, as a matter of fact.
Perfect. We've got some stuff starred in the chat. If a sub is reading good on a multimeter, but very scratchy and pops when playing, is it actually blown?
Yes or no?
Asks Quentin.
That could be yes or no.
Yeah, it could be yes or no.
That was actually one of the things we were going to cover, so thank you for bringing that question up. So if your sub or your speaker is scratchy when you play it, the first thing I would check if it was me is if it was a woofer or a speaker I could get to. I mean, very carefully and uniformly, push on the cone a little bit to see if it scratches. If it scratches all the time, obviously you've got a rubbing voice coil. Mm-hmm. But there's a couple other ways you can check that. And one of the first things that I do, especially if it's a speaker that I can't get to do that, is I will disconnect it from the amplifier. I will take a test speaker, connect it to that output, see if that output's scratchy. Mm-hmm. It's kind of what I call it's break the signal in the middle. And where to have your trouble. So if you break the signal at the amplifier,
or you can just swap the outputs from if you don't have another speaker, just swap them at the amplifier and see if the scratchiness switches sides or if it stays on that same speaker. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Which is one way to do it, but if they're both scratchy, you only have one channel, you can't do that. But yeah, it's a substitute speaker will tell you right away, hey, if I connect a substitute speaker to the amplifier and it's not scratchy, well, obviously the only thing left is the speaker. Mm-hmm. So that's one way to check it, but you talked about popping too. So when you turn it up, if you hear a popping noise, it may not be a bad speaker. It could be a poorly set crossover. Or it could be too much power. That's what happened to speakers with too much power. They actually bottom out or pop. So you got to figure out which is the problem. Is it a scratching problem or a popping problem? If it's both, it could be both. The speaker could be partially blown, where the voice coil is rubbing on the center pole piece, and you're overdriving it, or there's something wrong with the enclosure. It's not the enclosure; it's a ported enclosure, and it's not designed right. It's tuned to too high of a frequency, and you're playing it too low. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of different things that could be. But once again, I always rely on the substitute method. I always keep a speaker with some leads on it that I can test to see if I got signal, and it saves a lot of time and a lot of hassle. So, great question. JW, what else we got? Brian Park asked, can you use a power probe to test voltage and voltage drops? Jacob?
Great question.
We talked about that earlier.
Yeah. So, the answer is not really in practice. I suppose you could, but you'd be looking at the brightness of the probe, see how bright your light gets. But no, I would never use a power probe in a situation where you're testing the voltage at an amplifier or something, because amplifiers are voltage sensitive. A drop of 2 volts is sometimes enough to send that amp into protection mode. A power probe is just a light. So your power probe will still light up if you have low voltage. It might be a little bit more dim, but you really need a multimeter to truly understand what's going on at that amplifier.
What about a test light?
Test light, same thing. Yeah.
Now, one of the keys, if you've got a vehicle, and this is something that we teach in Automotive 101 nowadays, don't use test lights. There's something in a vehicle, and it's there for safety, of course, and it's called an airbag.
Oh, yes.
So that's one of the big no-nos, is you never probe the airbag leads with a test light, because you trigger the airbag, and that's very bad. So if you're using a conventional test light, they're going to run current through a filament, a light bulb, and there's resistance there, but it's not, you're going from ground to the signal. It's going to pass signal directly to ground, and you're going to trigger that airbag, and that can both be dangerous and it gets very expensive to replace airbags. So I always use a multimeter because they're just measuring the static voltage, and they usually, you look at the specifications, some of them have a couple, million ohms of resistance. They have a little bit, they have to measure it, but they've got such a high resistance that it isn't going to cause a current problem, and it's not going to set off an airbag or potentially damage a computer in a vehicle, because we got to think about the computers and how they work too. So great question. Definitely use a multimeter. Doesn't even have to be an expensive one. What else we got?
Christopher Austin says, can you use a breaker where a fuse should be? Yes, you absolutely can. Where breakers become a problem is where your breaker continually trips, and then you've got a guy who says, well, that breaker shouldn't be tripping, and they take and put a zip tie over it to prevent it from ever kicking back over the other way.
Little latching door?
Yeah, prevent the latch from going, or that breaker continually trips over and over and over again for a long period of time. And, I've been told, I've never measured it myself, but I've been told that breakers and their tolerance can actually adjust a little bit if it gets tripped over and over. So it won't be as accurate as it was when you first bought it. But with a fuse, you know that it's going to blow at about the same current draw every single time. So
And you have to replace it.
You have to replace it, but replacing a fuse, in my mind, is a lot better than relying on a breaker that gets tripped all the time. But if you're responsible with it, there's no reason you can't use a breaker. I just don't recommend it because there are really easy ways to make it a bad situation. Let's say that.
And also, you don't want to put a 250 amp breaker on an amplifier that's only got a 100 amp fuse. I mean,
that's absolutely
the breaker's
right.
really not doing any good at that point.
Don't you have a picture for us using a breaker
I will.
later?
Yes, I will. So, it's funny that we kind of know what a lot of these questions were going to be. We've got so much on here we can go over, and it's already 8:30.
Wow.
So we're definitely not going to get to all of it, but that's a great question. Who else has got a good question up there?
Brian Park, can you use LEDs inline to validate your connections are working, or status lights to keep an eye on a signal or wire no longer getting voltage? That's a good question. Probably.
Yes.
Well, yeah, you can.
You sure can.
The only thing I'm thinking about is if you have a voltage sensitive application, you probably wouldn't want to use an LED. We were just talking about this earlier. Diodes have a 0.7 volt drop across them as a function of their operation. So as long as you understand that, there's no reason why you can't.
Well, even in some fuses, they have an LED in the fuse, so if the main filament burns out, it's going to divert the signal through the LED, and there's a resistor in there as well, so it's not going to run full current through it, but that LED will actually light up on the fuse. So yes, you can do that. That's not a problem. And like he said, there's a 0.7 amp draw or 0.7 volt draw across a diode, and same thing, with an LED. An LED is a light emitting diode, and it's not in the list of things we're going to talk about today, but you talk about battery isolators. You've got the diode style and you've got the relay style, and both of them have their place. And I typically don't like to use the diode style because they drop 0.7 of a volt, so you're automatically dropping voltage to the amplifier all the time. And have to get one that has enough current capability. Like your little diodes in your amplifiers, they might be 1 amp, 5 amp, but if you got a 200 amp, system, you're going to need 200 amps worth of diode capability.
We were just talking about this, installing like 200 1 amp diodes in a huge bundle. But
Somebody try that and send us a picture. We'll use it on fails.
Actually,
for fun.
Maybe don't try that. Second
Nah, go ahead. It'd be a lot of fun.
I was going to say something, but I forgot. So never mind.
Makes it easy. Yeah. All right. So one of the other things that I want to talk about, since we're kind of running short on time a little bit, and then we'll actually take a couple more questions. If you haven't got your question answered yet, there's still time. You might win the lottery. One of the big things that I'm really, OCD about.
Everything?
Well, besides that, the other thing, it's making sure your balance and fader are correct. Yeah, that's a really big thing. So you get your whole system turned on, and The very next thing, as long as you got to make sure all speakers are working, obviously. But the next thing I always do is I go to the source if it has a balance and fader control, and I make sure that the balance and fader are working correctly.
Yeah, that was a very hard lesson for me to learn. There's been probably a dozen times I've hopped into a vehicle and done some troubleshooting and like why that speaker isn't louder than the rest of them or something to that nature. I've done everything I could think of and then checked the fader settings. It's not centered. I could have saved myself an hour, 2 hours of troubleshooting just by checking the settings and making sure they're centered. Or like if you're doing an install in a car and you're putting equipment in but the radio's already been installed, or they want to keep the factory radio and the fader is a little bit, it's not centered for whatever reason, maybe that's how they liked it, but us as the installer, we're wondering why things are off. Always check your fader and balance settings. I mean, it's such a simple thing to overlook, but it can cause you lots of problems.
Yeah. And if you just have a radio and the balance and fader, the balance is back, you're going to have to rewire the speakers. Yeah. I mean, that's your only choice at that point. And I've seen it happen. I mean, sometimes you just look at the diagram wrong, or you're like this, the positive or the left one's on the right. Well, you're laying on your back. Okay, now it's actually on that side. So it does happen, but it gets to your amplifier. And you're trying to figure out, is it a speaker problem or is it an RCA problem? You go back to that, alternate. You take the left and right out of the amplifier and twist them. Just swap the left for right and see if the problem changes or if it moves to the other speaker. So that's a great way to test if your amplifier is working, if all channels of the amplifier are working. So another thing you can do, like Jacob said, is you can turn the balance and just put one RCA into the amplifier and connect it to whichever speaker you think is matching up that RCA. If it doesn't, you probably want to take the speaker, disconnect it, and move it to where the RCA is, like a front speaker. Now, there's been some instances where I will intentionally wire them the way you wouldn't think. Normally, I always like to run, amp 1 to the front, amp 2 to the rear.
Yeah,
and the subwoofer.
I remember a car that we worked on together where we had like the RCAs, the colors messed up or something like that. Like the way that we like to do it and that John likes to do it, he'll use like our gray RCAs as the left and the blue as the right. And we had ran our wires and everything to the back and the colors were off at the amplifier. And we had to rerun all of the RCAs in the car so that the blue matched the red terminals on the amplifier and the radio to satisfy John's OCD. I was like, let's just swap the RCAs, and we did it the right way, which is, it's what we should have done in the first place. And this was a car where we really couldn't afford to band-aid things, you know what I mean? But
we should never do that anyway. But,
right.
And something else, another kind of path I was leading down, it's with our multi-channel amplifiers, like our 5 channels. They've got amp 1 input, amp 2 input, and an amp sub. They don't say front and rear. But with me, always wanting to connect, the front speakers to amp 1, the rear speakers to amp 2, the subwoofer, if you're getting signal from the RCAs, if you don't run a separate signal into the amplifier, a lot of them get it from the rear RCAs. So when I'm listening to a system, as I said many times, I don't like to play rear speakers at all.
I don't either.
So if I've got the subwoofer connected to signal from the amp 2 output and the amp 2 is rear, if I fade all the way to the front, it shuts off the rear speakers and the subwoofer. So that's the big one where, on our multi-channel amplifiers like the CXA, and we had the KX and the KXMA, I connect the rear speakers to amp 1 and the front to amp 2 because they're going to get the sub signal from amp 2. So that way you got a little bit better control over it. But it doesn't. That's why we don't call it front and rear anymore, because it literally is the same amplifier inside. It's just get a little different path.
Yeah, but to tack on and maybe cap off all this talk about troubleshooting, if there's anything John's taught me when working on cars, it's that you've got to have a consistent, repeatable way to do things. And we talk about this in all of our trainings too, but that's why John likes to have his gray RCAs go to the white and his blue go to the red, because if we ever have to get in that car again, we want to know that we did things a certain way. That way we're not getting into the car and maybe we had to swap or move around our RCAs or our speaker wires that are labeled something else, but that's not correct. We had to swap them around to make ends meet at the time. It's going to cause us a headache down the line. And God forbid anybody else has to work on that car that we touched. It would be nice for them, it'd be nice for anybody else who ever works on that car to know that things were done the right way. So there are ways to Band-Aid things, and if you're like really in a pinch, it's might be something you have to do, but have a procedure, have a repeatable procedure, especially when it comes to installs and troubleshooting, because it's going to save you guys a lot of time and effort.
And you guys in the audience might be thinking, why didn't you just swap the RCAs at the amplifier? Swap the amp 1 and amp 2. Now you could do that, the signal would work fine, but now your fader on the radio is backwards. You fade to the rear, which is actually to the front.
Yeah.
So you couldn't just swap the RCAs at the amp, you had to swap the speaker outputs, and sometimes you have to do both.
Yeah.
So it's just the way it is. Just do things the right way, and everything's going to work out pretty good. We got another question, JW?
I saw one that I liked, and it was somebody asked,
Got a bunch highlighted. We're going to be here all night.
how much product does it take to grow such a manly undercover cop mustache?
Is that a technical question?
I didn't see that one, but Carlos, to answer your question.
Well, first tell them who Carlos is.
Oh yeah, well you guys know Carlos is one of our other trainers.
He's haven't seen him on the show.
One of the other hosts for
one of the other knuckleheads.
Yeah. And he and I are pretty good buddies, and he's been teasing me about. He's like, "When did you join the police force, man?" But to answer your question, Carlos, I use a fine-tooth comb and a boar's hair brush and some beard oil, and I just keep that thing moisturized and brush the hair straight. That's really all it takes, man.
That's a lot more than I do.
But the one that I saw, I think, was what's
a real tech question?
from EJ right there. So EJ says, what's the best way to clean and keep your system clean from dust?
I just saw that.
So a couple things I like to do. I always have a microfiber cloth handy, and if you catch the dust before it becomes like caked on there, like super thick, you can just wipe it off, no problem. But we got these new car washes in town that have compressed air nozzles at them next to the vacuum stations. So you don't even need a microfiber. If your system's getting dusty, just take that compressed air and blow it off really quick, and all that dust is going to go out the door, basically. So
I guess my question for EJ is, where is the dust you're concerned about?
That's a good question.
Is it on the amplifier? Is it on the speaker? Is it on the radio? So yeah, that's just, especially in Oklahoma. Again, we used to be the Dust Bowl. Back in the early 1900s. But yeah, that's another OCD thing of mine. Is I hate dust, especially it gets in the corners of the and you can't get it out.
Yeah,
so dust can be a problem, but most equipment, especially I know all of our controls on our amplifiers, they're sealed, so they don't oxidize, they won't have that scratchiness. You don't have to worry about dust getting into it. The amplifiers are, basically IP66 rated, which is basically dust. It's not going to be a problem. So you generally don't have to worry about dust other than cosmetics. Now, you can just wipe it off like you say or use an air hose, but be careful with an air hose because it can be powerful enough to damage speakers, to actually, rip the surround or especially, buckle the diaphragm on a tweeter.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And some of the soft silk dome tweeters use like, sticky substance on the fabric, and you're not getting that off. So it is going to add a little bit of mass to the tweeter, so you're going to tune your tweeter a little bit lower, but that's splitting hairs at that point. So yeah, dust should not be a problem, but just like anything else, just keep things nice and clean. 8:39, I think we'll take one more question before we go to some of the other fun stuff.
Demetrius says, why don't you put a fan inside of the CXA models? Would it do any harm if I add one in the amp? My question is, why do you need a fan on your CXA amplifier?
Because it's getting hot.
Right. Well, if the amplifier is getting hot enough to where it's actually causing problems and it's going into thermal protection, then my first instinct is that it may not be a situation where you need a fan. Just like we were talking about earlier, if you've got high or excessive current draw or like a high resistance in your power circuit, your amplifier is going to get warmer because it's operating on lower voltage. So,
especially if it's a regulated amplifier.
Yeah.
With regulated amplifiers, as the voltage drop, current draw increases. So, it could be a voltage problem. It could be a power wire problem. If you're using copper-clad aluminum, the voltage is going to drop. It's going to pull more current, and you basically compound your problems.
But I mean, we've stuffed those amplifiers in really tight
Yeah,
compartments.
it shouldn't really have a problem with the CXA getting hot unless they can't breathe at all. I will tell you from experience, we used to sell amplifiers that had fans built in. In fact, we still do. The Warhorse has fans built into it, which I don't think we've ever been able to get to turn on, but there's a safety factor. There's three problems with a fan-cooled amplifier. First one is it's going to add cost to the amplifier. It's also going to add real estate. It's going to have to fit somewhere, and if you look at the end of this little amplifier, where are you going to put a fan on that? I mean, you can put it at the top, but once again, you're adding cost to it. You're also adding noise, because a fan will make mechanical noise. We talked about diagnosing engine noise. Well, I've had instances where you can hear the fans running on the amplifiers, and if you design an amplifier with a fan in the amplifier and it's there to keep the amplifier cool and the fan fails, because once again, it is a mechanical and electrical device, now your amplifier is going to overheat all the time. And something else that I learned from one of our electronic engineers many years ago was if you force cool an amplifier that's not designed for a fan, you can actually cool off the thermistor, which is what registers the temperature, so it doesn't shut the amp off in time to protect it from damaging it from heat.
That's
so
a good
fan
point.
can be bad because it can basically, circumvent the heat thermal protection on the amplifier. So yeah, we don't recommend that at all.
Yeah, definitely don't recommend putting a fan on there. But if you're trying to I think I saw him respond in the comments. He said he just wants to keep it a little bit cooler and possibly make a little bit more power. My best recommendation to you, man, is to make sure that amplifier is out in like an open space where you can get plenty of airflow across the top of it, because we designed it to have maximum efficiency while being air cooled. That chassis is the heat sink for the amplifier. So
and you can cheat a little bit. I've done this on vehicles where just put a little standoff, like a 1/4 inch or half, so the bottom is actually open too. Now this doesn't get as hot as the top because this is the heat sink, but that does have some thermal capacity in it, so sometimes that helps. But as far as the question is, the amplifier getting warm will not affect power. It will always have the same power output no matter what temperature until it goes into thermal protection, which on these amplifiers, they just shut down until they cool off enough. Some amplifiers will actually pull the rail voltage back and decrease output if they get too hot. They won't completely shut down, so it depends on how the amplifier is designed. But yeah, if you have a CXA that's getting hot and shutting down, more than likely, it's going to be the amplifier just isn't getting air moving around it somewhere. And in that case, yes, putting a fan to blow across it is not necessarily a bad thing.
Like a blower fan or something like
that.
But
don't, take the back of this and don't cut a hole in this and put a fan in the inside, because obviously you're going to void the warranty on the amplifier, and then you can actually confuse that thermal protection circuit. So that's a long, drawn-out answer for what was probably a pretty simple question. But that's what we do here. We make things more complicated and hopefully more fun.
Yeah.
So I've got 843. I think we're going to actually shift gears here a little bit, and I'm probably going to have to turn my computer back on for this one. But we've got a couple of things we also like to do, and I know some of you guys are waiting to see this. I watch the numbers over there. They keep increasing. So we're going to talk about some fails. Got to have those fails first, right?
Yeah, well, a couple of the audience members already brought up what we're going to show you guys.
Yeah,
so
and it's funny. Actually, they brought up more than one, and I forgot about this one till just now, because talking about fans.
Yeah, talking about fans, adding fans.
So what do we see here, guys? We see a fan on the voice coil of a woofer. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, we were actually talking about this, and we were like, that might not be an actually terrible idea. Now, it might keep the voice coil a little bit cooler. I mean,
yep, and it probably does. So there's no thermal protection circuit in the woofer. So yeah, the cooler you keep the voice coil, the better.
That's the
and
first
if you
time
look
I've-
at our new woofers, we have what we call forced air cooling, where it actually pulls air in the back of the back plate and blows right on the voice coil. So this is not a bad idea. I just think it's funny that it looks like it's hot glued and zip tied on.
Yeah.
But, it's kind of a fail, but, almost, so goofy that it's almost smart. Kind of like it. All right, Ernie, let's go to next one here. And this is one of my biggest pet peeves. When you see vehicles that, I've run into this years and years and years, where people do not cut off the excess wire. I mean, if you're just talking a strand or, two conductors, of fairly decent sized wire. I mean, obviously RCA cables and DIN cables use very small wires. You can shorten them, but it's a whole lot of work. And then once again, you're breaking the shielding. But if it's just speaker wires or power wire, cut that extra wire off. I mean, that is not going to affect the performance, but it sure doesn't look nice. And if you have to get in and troubleshoot it, it's a mess.
Or you could be like me and cut the wire too short and not have any slack, and then figure out after the fact. I mean, when I was in tech support, the guys would call me slack because anything that I touched, the wires were too short and you couldn't rearrange anything. So I learned my lesson, but that was me for a long time, making things way too short.
Yeah, and I've run into that on really nice high-end installs. And fortunately, look at some of the clean wire installs. They're a perfect example of, hey, it looks beautiful. I'm not knocking the clean wire install. I love them. I mean, I'm the same way. But you do decrease serviceability. So if you have to take a piece of equipment out, that wire is, down to the 1/10 of a millimeter, the right length, it's going to be very difficult to get back in there without any slack at all.
Just
and
do yourself
reconnect
a
the
favor.
amplifier. Just a little bit.
Yeah, like pull it back, tuck it behind a panel or something, but leave yourself at least like a few inches of extra
especially
slack
at the amplifier, leave at least an inch loop, that you have a little bit of, especially in, you're looking at 1/0 power wires. I mean, that stuff, if it's too short or, you don't have any, wiggle room, it's not going to be very easy to deal with. So yes, definitely a fail picture. This one's more of a funny picture than a fail picture. I have a problem with the battery. I received 2 positive screws.
Where's my negative screwdriver?
Yep. So he's got the positive screw and the negative terminal over there. So. All right, Mr. Phillips. Yeah. Anyway, that's just kind of fun. I ran across that. This is actually a little darker than I thought it was going to be.
Zoom in on that a little bit, John, for our guys on phones.
Yeah.
Cell phones.
I wonder if I can brighten it up because it's not as bright on the TV as what I was seeing earlier. Well, I think you can probably see it now. You obviously see this nice little melted connector. And what do you think caused that? A really poor connection.
Yeah, so that looks to me like they crimped it backwards. So they put the tooth of the crimper directly where those two ends
where the seam is,
where the seam is, and in the MECP handbook it tells you to do it the exact opposite way. Put the seam at like the U of your crimpers, and then put the tooth on the other side where there is no seam. That way you get a really good solid connection. If you do it that way, that's exactly what can happen. Your wires can pull out. So,
or you use a better connector that doesn't have a seam. There's that too. So. Yeah, I mean, just common sense again, guys. Just use a little common sense and it'll go a long way. I'm definitely gonna have to zoom in on this one. Here's a fail for you.
Got enough tweeters?
Yeah, those look like they're on the rear deck on the back seat of a car.
Yeah, and those four tweeters weren't enough, so we had to add like a horn-loaded
2x6
tweeter.
piezo horn tweeter. We actually use those for quite a while in a lot of our full-range speakers. So
yeah, I think the original KICKER had one of those in it.
Yes, actually, two of them.
Similar style.
Had 2 of those, one on each side. What I didn't get a good picture of, because this was actually a video, I did a freeze frame, is there were tweeters hanging from the wires on the pillars on both sides.
Oh,
they were
nice.
like fringe.
God,
Tweeter fringe.
I wonder what that sounded like. I wouldn't want to listen to it, but I wonder what it sounded like.
Of course, when you're driving, it's going to sound different because they're all going to be shaking and your image is going to move all over the vehicle.
Dolby Atmos.
Yeah, there you go. I love this picture. I love it, but I hate it the same way.
I've not done this exact thing, but I've done something.
Tell them what's
very
going on
similar.
here, Jacob.
Well, it looks like they used plumber's tape as like a bus bar, which obviously I wouldn't recommend.
Metal.
It's metal. I wonder what the fusible value is of some plumber's tape, like how much current that would.
Plumber strap?
Yeah, plumber's strap.
Not tape.
Yeah. Well, that's what I call it, But I wonder what they would. What the fusible value of that is.
I don't know. And a lot of that stuff is zinc plated. It's galvanized.
Yeah.
Which has an even higher resistance, and now you got bad connections. So it's just funny. I mean, hey, it works, so we can do it, right?
Yeah. But, I used a hose clamp one time on a tractor because power terminal broke. I took the wire, stuck it down next to the post, and just hose clamped it and tightened it down with the screwdriver until I could get something
We've actually put pictures up like that, I believe, in the fail.
I think that was my picture when we did. But anyway, yeah, this is just. And then I was looking at the left there where those two loose wires are. One of them has red heat shrink and one of them has black heat shrink. I hope that one of them's not a positive and a negative. But based on the picture, that's probably the case. I mean, even the eyelets are different diameters, so probably.
So there's no telling.
Yeah, there's no telling.
But I will say, when I'm not picking on anyone in general, but I've seen some really bad installs on hydraulic cars with the systems where they'll run like an 8-gauge jumper between like 10 batteries.
It's okay, John. You can call me out. I know.
When is the last time you had hydraulics on a vehicle? But I've seen those actually catch on fire at events.
That's crazy.
Because that wire is, 8-gauge wire is not enough to run 200-300 amps of current through it. I mean, we've seen it 60, maybe 80 absolutely tops, but not consistently. So make sure you have the right gauge wire and make sure you use it the right application and the right material. That plumber's backstrap, it's made for plumbing. It's made for holding plastic pipes in place.
Yeah. Yeah, not distribution points for car stereo.
So we brought this subject up a little bit earlier too. And what do we have here, Jacob?
Well, there's a home style breaker on the left of that battery terminal there.
But it's a breaker.
It's a breaker. It is indeed.
So there is some protection there. The problem is, even if you have the right value, it's not designed for automotive use. It's definitely not sealed, especially being under the hood. That's going to be a problem.
Oh, God, yeah.
But it's designed for AC. So DC, completely different characteristics. I mean, DC changes directions, obviously, or AC changes directions, 60 times a second. It's 60 hertz AC signal. DC is straight current. So I don't really know how that would react. If it would react, and would it react quick enough?
We'd have to test it. Maybe we can do that on a show one time.
That'd be kind of fun.
Yeah. See at what point the breaker trips by slowly turning up the gain on the amp.
Doing DC and AC.
Yeah. So that's a good idea.
Yeah, we wouldn't have to use an amp. We just use a power supply.
Yeah.
And we got this figured out.
Write that down, Ernie.
Yep, we got the next one all figured out. So that's going to end our failed sections of the night. Once again, hopefully this is all in fun. And if these are any of your installs, no offense, we're just having fun, guys. But, we've all had to do things, in a pinch. And, if you just don't know, you don't know.
Well,
and that's why we do this show.
I'll be the first one to call myself out every time, guys. So
I'm the second one to call you. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. I'm the same way. It's like, you do something, it's like, I really shouldn't have done that, but I really didn't have a choice and I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
So once again, that's why we do this show, is to try to educate you guys and, let you know you have the proper and the safest way to do some of these things. All right, so we're going to go to some cool install pics next, I think.
And there was a question in the chat. Somebody was wanting to know where to send us pictures for cool installs and things like that. And I think we want to direct that to social@kicker.com, and then Colin can share that with us. That we can
that'd
show
be a
on
great
the show.
place to do it.
If you guys have installs that you're really proud of, or you have some installs of things you've done that you're not so proud of, or seen, then we can absolutely pop that up on the show if you're cool with it. And
yeah, obviously they're sending to it. I hope they're cool with it.
Yeah.
But we don't get enough pictures from you guys. I've actually requested pictures, doing some videos of some of your installs. And didn't get very many, responses at all. But feel free to send your stuff. I mean, we'd love to show it, especially if it's cool, and especially if it's really bad. We'd like to laugh at you. So, all right. I think it's time to go to some cool installs and see some people that are doing it right.
Hey, I know whose that is. That is Andy Snap. He came down for our Kicker U training,
Yep.
and he built this crazy enclosure. He's been sending me like update pictures and things like that, and I can't wait to hear it.
10 Solo X10s in a vented enclosure.
Yeah, he showed me a video where he had them all lined up on the table.
Yeah, that was actually in the sequence as well. If you go to our Instagram page, you can actually find this and the rest of the pictures. And that's, once again, the Kicker Audio Instagram page, which is where I get a lot of these. Because you guys aren't sending us pictures, I got to go there and get them.
Yep, but Andy with Overkill Customs in Tennessee, he's does crazy stuff like this all the time, and he's he's one of the big enthusiasts in car stereo. He's the guy that keeps the torch lit and passes it on. So we love to see stuff like that.
Cool. Well, let's move on to picture number 2. This is actually, we talked about JW and I think Steven were at
That's Andy's,
Ocean City,
isn't it? Or Andy, or
I don't remember whose it is.
His last name.
But this was in our booth at Ocean City.
Wademeyer. Bill Wademeyer. That's right, not Andy. Bill Wademeyer. I was thinking of Andy W. from does all the high end trainings. Wademeyer. Yeah. Weird W last name, so I got them mixed up. But
Yeah, there you go. Pretty cool install on this Jeep. And once again, go to the Instagram page from Kicker and you'll see a bunch more of them. Here's another one I found. I just thought this was kind of cool and clean. It's thinking outside of the box. Literally, magnets outside of the box. Get it?
Yeah. Somebody said, Andy, do you also have a mustache?
Oh, that's funny.
You guys are really good on this mustache thing. That's awesome.
I think one of the shows they were dogging my shirt that I wore because it wasn't black and yellow. But nice install, very clean. I like the illumination. I mean, it's thinking outside the box a little bit. It's actually a pretty cool install. Motorcycles, yep. We don't see enough cool installs on motorcycles.
I like how they painted the grills to match.
Yeah, and that was one of the things I was going to point out. They took the time to key the grills to match the rest of the bike. So don't be afraid to do that. All of our products, I mean, you can paint our amplifiers. It's going to affect the cooling a little bit, but I've seen people do it. The worst thing, I've seen vehicles that the product just really stuck out. Everything's, a different company. Then you get these black amplifiers in the middle of all this, nice, sometimes it looks good and sometimes it looks kind of out of place. But it is all personal choice. I mean, cosmetics is whatever you happen to like. So, but this was actually really cool. And obviously an aftermarket fairing, because I don't think Harley built the fairing with 4 6.5s in the front, but cool install. Here's one. This was actually in our booth at SEMA
that's
2 years ago.
That kind of reddish pink
Toyota.
Yeah, Toyota that was there.
And if Tim was still here on the show, he could tell us exactly who it is because he's friends with this guy. But it was a retro build using our SS amplifiers. But just the fact that the enclosure is acrylic and it's in the back window of the pickup. It's not technically a cut through, but it's a blow through. So it's blowing through the back window. And if you notice, I always talk about separate chambers on the woofers. He even divided those with the plexiglass.
That's cool.
So, and I just remembered the story on this. NASA bent that plastic for him.
That's right, yeah.
It was done at NASA. The guy was a NASA aeronautics engineer, and they actually used their ovens to heat the plastic and put it on a form and bent that at NASA.
It's too cool, man. The amount of effort that goes into these vehicles is just incredible.
Yeah, it really is. All right, we're definitely getting down to the point where we're about ready to give some stuff away. But before we do that, as I mentioned, Stephen, were you at Ocean City too? Yep, so Stephen was at Ocean City. Did you get to drive the truck? He still hasn't got to drive the XRV. He will. It's going to happen.
One of these days.
I've only driven short distances.
Like around in the parking lot? No, I'm just kidding. So JW and Steven went to Ocean City for Jeep Week. And let's start opening some pictures of that. If I remember right, what Jeremy was telling me on this was the lineup for the crawl on the beach.
Oh, wow.
So all the Jeeps getting ready to go out and drive on the sand. I bet that was a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
I know a lot of the events I've been to, I mean, some of those things are really cool. It's like the parades before, or, getting to drive the sort of like the Hot Rod Power Tour is a lot of fun because you can go on all different routes and you're with a whole bunch of car people. I bet this was just absolutely a blast for the Jeep people. I think Carlos was there, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think he was. He was hanging out with Steven and Jamie White up there and all those guys.
Jamie's one of our reps, one of our really good reps. And it's been a great show, and I keep, putting my request in to go, and like, come on, I'm ready to go to this one. But
one of these days.
Yeah, well.
You just got to get Jamie on your side and have him ask for it.
I've got him on my side, but Carlos does a really good job at this event, too. And if I remember right, I know there's a lot of Spanish-speaking customers up in that area, and he does a lot with those guys.
Makes him the perfect fit.
Yep, I only speak 2 languages, English and bad English. So talking about the crawl on the beach, and someone has to explain to me the duck thing with the Jeeps. I still don't understand.
I don't get that.
You try to ask Matt, because one of our regionals, Matt Matheson's got a really cool supercharged Jeep. You ask him about the ducks, and he just gets kind of angry and walks away. So there's something about the ducks he doesn't like.
I think you have to own a Jeep, and then as soon as you sign the paperwork, it just enters your brain, and you understand the duck thing.
So I guess, I have to go buy a Jeep. Then.
I've never owned a Jeep. I don't. Maybe you can ask Sandy.
And it's a lot of fun. I mean, I love all the quirky things that go along with some of these clubs, and that's what makes things, fun and different. So
She started it to cheer up a friend of hers, so she started putting rubber ducks on her Jeep.
really,
Oh, that's
Caught on.
okay. That's that's a lot more wholesome.
Camera heard that, so you might
Yep.
Okay, so Steven said it was about a lady who wanted to cheer her friend up, so she started putting ducks on her Jeep, which it's a lot more of a wholesome story than I expected it to be, but I don't know.
That's still kind of cool.
Sometimes these things that take off are not wholesome, so.
like copper-clad aluminum.
Yeah.
Had to work something in there. All right, Ernie, let's go to the next picture. This is actually on the beach again.
Looks like they're spelling duck out on the sand.
Yeah, that looks like a lot of fun. And I've got to drive on some obstacle courses, with a couple vehicles. And it is really neat when you get to do that with your own vehicle because you can put it in situations that you normally wouldn't be able to do.
Yeah, all right, John, so we've got some clarification in the comments.
Yep.
Mr. E says the act of placing a rubber duck on someone's Jeep is called Duck Duck Jeep.
Okay.
And if somebody likes your Jeep, they leave you a rubber duck. So, yeah, that seems pretty cool.
All right, now we know.
If somebody likes my cars, they leave a door ding in the side of it. So
I don't think it's just your car either.
I'd much rather have a rubber duck.
Yeah. I had a bird try to buy my car the other day.
A bird?
Yeah, it left a deposit on the hood. I had to do it. So
if you guys could hear the groan from the back right now.
Yeah, I think Ernie just threw up. Yeah. Here's the booth that the guys set up, and when we go to an event, we always got a killer booth. You see the XRV in the background of that awning, and that's once again where that green Jeep was. You can kind of see it under the KICKER sign right in the middle. But is that Matt's Jeep right there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is Matt's Jeep. So that's one we were just talking about with the supercharger. What a cool Jeep.
Is the drab or the olive green one right there? Or,
yeah.
Okay. I don't think I've ever seen it.
No, Matt's is the one in front,
or
the black one.
Okay.
Yeah, I was actually in the back the other day. I think they unloaded it from the semi and just put it in. So, and here's another view from the other side of the booth. So if you guys ever get a chance to go see one of these events, especially when we have the XRV there with the boom room inside and the displays, the guys have done a whole lot of work to, make that thing what it is. And it's a whole lot of work to set it up and, hang out with everyone, but it's so worth it all the time.
That green Gladiator on the right, that's Bill W's that we showed you all the bed of. So that's the Jeep that system was actually in. So
how cool is that? So that's going to end. Thanks going on. I guess we do have one other little announcement. There it is over there. We do have something cool that's going to start shipping or has started shipping.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So you guys remember we had this KMXL coaxes, which were the 6.5, the 8, and the 6x9 with the compression driver in the center. You can now get them in this wonderful white or black can. So that's a new product that just started shipping. So you can now buy the KMXLs fully loaded in enclosure with the clamp that fits on the bars. I mean, it's great, and you couldn't ask for a better sounding can.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys like our KM65 speakers, just how they sound, these are kind of like the big brother to those. They handle quite a bit more power. They project for long distances, and these in the can, they're perfect for mounting on like a wake tower or something like that for those guys that wakeboarding out behind the boat, or you've got people swimming around the boat. This is exactly what you guys need. So check that out.
Yep, and that's the
pretty cool.
8-inch version. And coming up, we got a couple cool events that we're going on. Of course, we got Knowledge Fest in Dallas. I think you're going down to that one.
Yep, I'll be in K-Fest Dallas. So come see me, come see the mustache, and hang
I think
out.
Andy, funny W name Waymeyer. I think he's putting on a little course there. He keeps seeing some advertisements for that. So
yeah, he puts on really, really solid and informative trainings. If you guys want to go into the depths of like polarity and phase and high-end tuning, definitely check out his trainings if you guys are going to K-Fest Dallas.
yeah, he's got a lot of cool posts. He's doing a lot of 3D printing on brackets. Just really a neat guy, very, very smart. So anytime you get a chance to learn, I mean, I would love to go. I mean, I was disappointed that he was going to be doing this class down there, and I won't be there because I will be with Steven. Are you going? Yep, we're going to be at Costa Mesa. We're going to the Sand Sports Show.
Nice.
Which is all off-road vehicles. So we'll be there for that. And that was a really cool show last year. So we're going to go back and do that again right there next to Huntington Beach. So we'll be in California while you're in Dallas.
Cool.
Driving to that one.
You're driving?
Should drive a little bit at least.
Cool.
So I think I'm driving one of the kicker trucks back from Dallas.
Nice.
So we've got, with all the L7s in the back and the sound system.
the
in the bed.
615s?
Yeah, it's going to be killer.
6 vented 15s in the cab of a truck. Yeah, we had 3 of those at one point running around. And I think we redid one and we put 4 Solo X 15s.
I think that may be the one that I'm driving.
Might be.
I'm not sure, but I'll have to wait and see. It's going to be fun, though. I'm going to stop at every gas station I can and just...
And that's the fun thing about driving these events,
Let it
these
rip for
vehicles,
people.
because you sure, but just be careful it doesn't knock your mustache off.
Yeah, just peel it off. Like,
Just rip sure.
Stop at Bucky's.
yeah, Bucky's is a must-see on the way.
All right.
We've got some stuff to give away, don't we, John?
Yep, we sure do. So I think they're running. I think, Colin, are you running the giveaway back there? There it is. Winner number 3, Cindy R. from Florida. Sunny, humid, hot Florida. You are going to win, obviously, the UnMasked t-shirt and the Kicker koozie. You're going to get a set of EB400s, which are weather-resistant Bluetooth earbuds. So, which are really cool and they're really nice sounding. I really like those EB400s. So, Cindy, you win the 3rd prize. Actually, they're all really good prizes. So, number 2, who's number 2 there, Jacob?
Dustin H. from Indiana. Congrats, Dustin, on your prize. You get the
TWS2s.
TW2s, yeah. True wireless headphones. I like them a lot. We use them on our plane flights.
Yeah, I use them all the time, and we've got the TWS1s and the TWS2s. The big difference is the TWS2s have the little silicone ear tips.
That's right.
So the TWS1s are more of the AirPod style, and then these have actually got the replaceable silicone earphone, covers on them. So
Get a little bit better seal in your ear, I think.
And they sound great too. I really like all of them. In fact, I use the TWS1s when I ride my bike just because I never remember to grab my TS2s off my computer bag. So I just keep those in the back so I can use my TWS1s while I'm riding my bike and don't have to worry about a cord hanging down or I'm going in between the earbuds. So too cool. So congratulations on that. And Jeremy B. from South Dakota. You're the grand prize winner of the t-shirt, the koozie, and a Bullfrog BF100.
Awesome.
Which is this great little Bluetooth speaker. We probably need to show one of those maybe next time what it is, because it's really cool. And the things are completely waterproof. It's cool. You actually throw the thing in a lake, a pond, or the ocean and let it play music while it's rolling around in the surf.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the Illinois River up here in northeastern Oklahoma, and I take it to float down the Illinois and, spill your adult drinks on it, drop it in the river, whatever. I mean, it's
Deposits.
Bird deposits, bird trying to buy your speaker off you. It'll hold up. So, and they sound good too.
So we've also got another deal where I think we're going to give away on the next show. We're going to be doing the $2,500 grand prize. October 15th.
October
so
15th.
A little bit farther away.
Yeah, you guys got, 2 more shows, I think.
Yep. And once again, you're going to register on our Kicker website, and I think it's kicker.com/giveaway. Is that right, Colin? Yep. He said it's right. Hey, I remembered something.
So it looks like it's going to be a giveaway with excess power as well, and then you get to design a $2,500 audio system. So it's a pretty hefty giveaway. You guys are absolutely going to want to enter
Who's
this.
going to help you design that?
Steven is.
Yeah, Steven. So Steven's going to help you guys design this audio system. We're going to give you his personal phone number and his home address.
And his bank account.
And his bank account.
Yep, 'cause
Social
he's going to pay for it.
Yeah, and the money is coming out of Steven's paycheck. So he drew some pretty crazy pictures last time, and we didn't like that, so we're going to make him pay for your product.
Yep.
John's going to help you design the audio system, so you get to pick out the product. And
I enjoy doing that for you guys. So that being said, we guys want to thank you for your support. Thanks for hanging out, because we can't do it without you. If you guys have any questions or you got subjects you want to hear us talk about, please send them to us, support@kicker.com. And once again, let your friends know if you liked what you heard, and hit the like and subscribe so we keep doing this. We've been, 140, how many shows,
dude,
Ernie?
I don't even know.
141 or 142? 141 shows. So
I know it's been at least 2 years that we've done
yeah,
this.
so there's a lot of good information, and they're all available on the Kicker YouTube channel.
4 years.
4 years, yep.
Wow, okay. Huh.
Since COVID started, because that's how this started.
Right,
we couldn't go to SEMA to do COVID. And talking about events, we're going to SEMA again, so we'll have some cool new products there, but that's not a consumer-related show. Unfortunately, most of you guys probably won't be able to get into that, but if you're in the industry, you can, or the automotive industry of some kind. So, guys, thank you again for tuning in. We only went about 10 minutes long, but we didn't even hardly scratch the list of troubleshooting. So I'm sure we can come up with another show and go over a bunch more of these subjects, and how to really determine what's going on, because we all know when your system's working to its top performance, that's when it's going to sound the best and you're going to be the happiest with it. If it's not working, it's really irritating, and I'm guilty of that. If something's not exactly right, I don't want to listen to it at all until I fix it.
Me either.
It just makes you angry and angrier. So
I've had to stop on the side of the road with my laptop and fix something before I drive any further, and it's kind of become a problem, honestly.
It's amazing, when you sit in a vehicle and tune it, you get something called listener fatigue. After about an hour, you're done. I mean, you may not know it, but your ears are just, forget it. And the funny thing is, you get in the car the next day, and it's going to be nothing like what you remember to do.
What did I do?
And then you start driving it, and it all changes again. So it sounds very good sitting still, but I start driving it just because there's road noise and other things going on. So just remember that there is right and wrong as far as troubleshooting and putting stuff together. But when it comes to sound, there is no right or wrong. It's all personal choice. It's whatever you like. So our job here is to help you get to that sound that you like for your own individual listening. So that's why we do this. And we want to hang out for dinner, because they buy us dinner every night. What do we have tonight?
Chipotle. Not Texas Roadhouse.
We didn't have Texas, all because of you, by the way.
Well, I mean,
we could have had steak tonight.
Can you blame me,
though? He
though?
doesn't like Texas Roadhouse.
No, sir.
We can. I just did blame you. So thanks, guys, for tuning in. Have a good night, and tune back in 2 weeks at 7:30 Central Time, right here at the Kicker World Headquarters in our UnMasked studio at Stillwater, Oklahoma. I guess that's where we're broadcasting from. Yeah. I don't know where I was going. There's something else I was doing. But anyway, you guys know how to find us. Tell your friends and neighbor, wake the kids, and
maybe don't
have a good night.
Kids.
And hang on tonight. Don't forget to Living Loud with Andy, his after show.
Yep.
He'll be doing that. And if you're not a member of the Kicker Club, 60,000 plus members. That's amazing. So thank you guys for all your support. And we wouldn't be the #1 car audio brand in the industry if it wasn't for that. So thanks again, and good night.
Yep, see you next time, guys.